Our lesson today is about the ancient Greece influence on modern-day America. First, let's begin by reviewing our standard for today's lesson. Today we're focusing on SS3H1, letter A, which says, identify the influence of Greek architecture, wall, and the Olympic Games on the present. But just for this lesson, we will specifically be focusing on Greek architecture, which are the three Greek columns. Here are the three Greek columns, the Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. The column pictured here is called Doric. Doric is more of a dull column, so try to remember the two D's, Doric and dull. Let's look into where the Doric is located. This building here is called the Parthenon in Greece. It is made up of Doric columns. Notice that these columns are not very fancy, just like the close-up picture we viewed a minute ago. Try to remember that these Doric columns are dull. Here is a picture of an Ionic column. Notice that the top of this column kind of looks like cinnamon rolls. It's a bit more fancy than the Doric. The last column is called Corinthian. These columns are much more fancy than the Doric and Ionic. Now let's take a look at where we might see these columns located. This is the U.S. Supreme Court building. As you can see, it is made up of the Corinthian columns. Notice at the top that they are very fancy. Now let's review. Let's remember that Doric columns are dull, so try to always remember to match up Doric and dull. Let's look one more time at a picture of the Doric column. Notice it is not fancy at all. Our next column is the Ionic column. The Ionic column sort of looks like cinnamon rolls, so try to remember the sentence, I like cinnamon rolls. Connect the I and the C. Here is one more picture of the Ionic column. Notice at the top that it looks like cinnamon rolls. The last column is the Corinthian. There isn't really a good clue to remember this one, but just remember that it is the fanciest of all. And let's look once more at the Corinthian columns. Notice at the top that they are very fancy, unlike the Doric and Ionic. Now let's review what you should have learned so you will be ready to do activities and answer questions about this subject. The basic names of the three Greek columns are Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. Make sure that you remember these three names. Make sure you also remember that there are Doric columns found on the Parthenon. Also remember that the U.S. Supreme Court building has Corinthian columns on it. These are the fanciest. If you were to see a picture of these three columns, you should be able to identify them with their names, the Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. Be ready for your homework tomorrow in class, and make sure that you review everything that we have studied in today's lesson. And don't forget to be prepared.